Welcome back to Treasure Island. Today we're on Chapter 2, Black Dog Appears and Disappears. Not long after this came the first of the mysterious events that rid us at last of the captain, though not of his affairs. It was a bitter cold morning, and it was plain that my poor father was unlikely to see the spring, meaning he doesn't feel he'll live long enough for spring to come around. One January morning, very early, the captain set out down the beach, his cutlass swinging under the skirts of the old blue coat, his brass telescope under his arm, his hat tilted back. So when we say cutlass, a cutlass is a short sword with a slightly curved blade. It was formerly used by sailors, or in our case, pirates. Mother was upstairs with Father, and I was sitting at the breakfast table when the parlor door opened, and a man stepped in on whom I had never set eyes before. He was a pale creature, missing 2 fingers of his left hand. He was not like a sailor, yet he had a smack of the sea about him, meaning he looked weathered like he'd been at sea. "Is this here table for my mate, Bill?" he asked with a kind of leer. I told him that this was for someone called the captain who stayed in our house. "Well," said he, "my mate Bill would likely be called the captain. Let's say that your captain has a cut on one cheek, the right one. Now, is my mate Bill in his here house?" I told him he was out walking. "Which way is he gone?" When I had told him how the captain was likely to return and how soon, he said, "Ah, this'll be as good as a drink to my mate, Bill." I had my own reasons for thinking the stranger was mistaken, but it was no affair of mine, I thought. Besides, it was difficult to know what to do. The stranger stood inside the door, peering round like a cat waiting for a mouse. Once I stepped out myself, but he ordered me in with an oath that made me jump. Then he patted me on the shoulder, told me I was a good boy, and that he had taken quite a fancy to me. "But the great thing for boys is discipline, sonny. If you had sailed with Bill, you wouldn't have soon there to be spoke to twice, or you wouldn't have stood there to be spoke to twice. We'll just go back behind the door and give Bill a little surprise." The stranger put me behind him in the corner so that we were both hidden by the door. I was very uneasy, and it added to my fears that the stranger was frightened himself. He cleared the hilt of his cutlass and loosened the blade on the sheath. And all the time we were waiting there, he kept swallowing as if he had a lump in the throat. At last the captain strode in, slammed the door, and marched straight to his breakfast. "Bill," said the stranger in a voice he tried to make bold. The captain swung around on his heel. He had the look of a man who sees a ghost, or something worse, if anything can be. Upon my word, I felt sorry to see him, all in a moment turned so old and sick. "Black Dog," he gasped. "And who else?" returned the other, getting more at ease. "Black Dog come to see his old shipmate Billy. Ah, Bill, Bill, we have seen a sight of times, us two, since I lost them 2 talons," holding up his mutilated hand with the missing 2 fingers. "Now look here," said the captain. "You've run me down. Speak up. What is it?" "I'll have a glass of rum, and we'll sit down and talk square like old mates," said Black Dog. When I returned, they were seated. Now, Black Dog next to the door, sitting sideways to have one eye on his old shipmate and one on his retreat, meaning he wanted to keep an eye on his exit out of there. For a long time, I could hear nothing but low gabbling. At last, the voices grew louder, and I could pick up a word or two, mostly oaths from the captain. "No, an end of it," he cried once. "And if it comes to hanging, hang all, say I." Then there was an explosion of oaths and noises. The chair and the table went over, and a clash of steel followed, and then a cry of pain. The next instant I saw Black Dog in full flight, and the captain hotly pursuing, both with drawn cutlasses. Blood streamed from Black Dog's left shoulder. At the door the captain aimed one last tremendous cut, which would certainly have split Black Dog to the backbone had it not been intercepted by the inn's signboard. So here's a picture of that. So he went to swing at him, and he would have hit him in the back, except that when he went up to swing, his sword, his cutlass, went into the inn board, that board that was the advertisement for their inn, and stuck there. Once on the road, Black Dog, in spite of his wound, disappeared over the hill in half a minute. The captain stood staring like a bewildered man. At last he turned back into the house. "Jim," says he, "rum," and he reeled and caught himself one hand against the wall. "I must get away from here. Rum, rum." I ran to fetch it, but while I was fumbling, I heard a loud fall in the parlor, and running in, saw the captain lying on the floor. My mother, alarmed by cries and fighting, came running downstairs. Between us, we raised his head. He was breathing very loud and hard, but his eyes were closed and his face a horrible color. We had no idea what to do with him when Dr. Livesey came in to visit my father. "Oh, doctor," we cried, "what shall we do?" "Where is he wounded?" "Wounded? No, that man has had a stroke, as I warned him. Now, Mrs. Hawkins, run upstairs to your husband and tell him nothing about it. I must do my best to save this fellow's worthless life. Jim, you get me a basin." Well, when I got back with the basin, now basin would have been a bowl to hold water, the doctor had already exposed the captain's great sinewy arm. Sinewy meaning like he could see the tendons and muscles and stuff in his arm. It was tattooed in several places. "Here's luck," "a fair wind," and "Billy Bones his fancy." All of those were tattooed on his forearm. Up near the shoulder there was a sketch of a gallows and a man hanging from it, done with great spirit. "Prophetic," said the doctor, touching this picture with his finger. "Jim," he said, "are you afraid of blood?" Now, what does he mean, do you think, by prophetic? You guys have learned about the meaning of prophecy, and if somebody makes a prophecy, right, it's kind of a prediction of the future. So if something is prophetic, meaning it is predicting the future for him, like he thinks it's kind of ironic that the captain has this picture tattooed on his arm of a man hanging, because if you recall, the doctor, Dr. Livesey, has already told them that if he didn't clean up his act, he was going to end up hanging on the gallows, right? "No, sir," said I, so he's not afraid of blood. "Well, you hold the basin then," said he, and with that he took a lancet and opened a vein. So he's cut his arm and opened the vein up. A great deal of blood was taken before the captain opened his eyes and looked mistily about him. So this is bloodletting. First, he recognized the doctor with an unmistakable frown. Then he saw me and he looked relieved. But suddenly his color changed and he tried to raise himself, crying, "Where's Black Dog?" "There's no Black Dog here," said the doctor. "You have been drinking and you have had a stroke. I have just dragged you out of the grave," meaning he has just saved his life by cutting him and making him bleed. And remember that back many years ago, that was the common practice, was to cut open a vein and let them bleed, just like we learned of Robin Hood and in King Arthur, right? Bloodletting. "Hear this. One glass of rum won't kill you, but if you take one, you'll take another and another, and if you don't stop, you'll die. Do you understand? Come now, I'll help you to bed." Well, we managed to hoist him upstairs and laid him on his bed. Then the doctor went off to see my father, taking me by the arm. I have drawn blood enough to keep him quiet a while, he said. He should lie for a week where he is. Another stroke would finish him. So when you lose quite a lot of blood, it makes you very tired. So in this day, he wouldn't have had any medicine to really make him tired, and he didn't give him any, but he's drained enough blood out that the captain's going to feel very tired, okay, because he's lost a lot of blood. All right, and we're going to stop here and pick up on chapter 3 in a little bit.